Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's session on engaging your virtual audience. We are so excited to have one of our amazing educators at Brigham, Dr. Shubha Ramani, speak with us today about how we can all bring up a level the online teaching that we do. I am so excited about having her here, and why don't we go ahead and hand it over to Shubha. Thank you, Shubha.
So welcome everyone, and in today's talk, I really want all of us on an even platform. We have all had success stories, we've all had challenges, and I was hoping that in this session we'll discuss our challenges, solutions that we have developed, and then share our success stories with each other. So this is the topic I took, and as you can see in the background, I've used the brain and the learning theories, multiple learning theories, and various expert psychologists and educationalists in the background who have developed the behaviorist tradition, the cognitivist tradition, the constructivist tradition of teaching and learning. Session goals are quite simple. We'll share our success stories in addressing challenges to virtual teaching, which we've all had. We'll demonstrate in a practically application of the following using an icebreaker. We'll use some polls. We'll use the chat box, and then we'll do one exercise on the breakout rooms, and then we will brainstorm together on the whiteboard. But at the backbone is the exploration of intersection of theory and practice. Like, why should we do what we're talking about? The why is very, very important. So here is a little bit of an icebreaker. Carnival. I'm sure everyone can find something fun in this picture. And therefore, I deliberately decided to use this picture to show the ground rules. Mute when not speaking so that you know there's no background sound. Chat freely. Please turn on video whenever you can, but at least during the breakout sessions. It's lovely to see people's faces. And do share your tips and success stories, because we are all expert, or we're all in this together, basically facing it. Above all, this is my motto for teaching and learning: have fun. First couple of slides I want to introduce when we start thinking about, on a live or virtual teaching and learning, we need to think about three things. And this is from the Harvard group on virtual learning. First thing is content. What are the core concepts or ideas that we want our participants or learners to learn? First thing. Second is the pedagogy. What is the most effective way to get our learners to engage with the material? Not necessarily just learn, but engage with the material to understand these concepts, not memorize, and maximize learning. So, and think also before the class, asynchronously, during, and after. And finally, how can we assess our learners' understanding of the material most effectively? So our guiding principles for today's session, very simple. 2, going to wrap it around adult learning theory, how and why adults learn. And the second is about social learning, how learning is enhanced through social interactions. And in order to answer those questions, I'm going to use 5 approaches: icebreaker, polls, chats, which we've already started doing, breakout rooms, and finally we'll finish up with a little whiteboard exercise. So I love this picture. It's who doesn't love stories? So I'm going to tell you a story. So I was doing a webinar, and this was an international webinar with a group of people. Fortunately, I had a team of presenters with me. And do you know how people say the Mac never crashes? Wrong. Mine just crashed as I started welcoming people. This is going around the world. And so I want to pause here and ask people, what would you do if you had been in my place?
I probably would have first tried to log right back in.
Okay.
So this actually did happen to me also. I basically just kept talking. I think the biggest thing you can do is try to engage the audience in a conversation, have a discussion, because that's what, after all, you're doing is engaging people in the discussion. You don't need technology to do that.
Others?
I think it can be incredibly helpful, especially if it's a really important talk, to have a virtual teaching assistant or somebody who can hop in at that point and say, I know Christina's coming right back. She prepared a question for discussion in case something like this happened. So that way you have somebody that you know can take over the situation until your computer starts working again.
So what I did was, obsessive as I am, I had an iPhone next to me, I had an iPad next to me. So while my computer was starting, I logged in on the iPad. So at least, as Eric was saying, I continued talking while my other team members had continued the presentation. They had my slides, so they continued the presentation. But here's where I want to stop for a moment and say, I'm using an icebreaker here by telling a story and narrating a story of something, a disaster that happened at the start of the presentation. But strangely enough, people loved it. The participants, they rated it very highly. They didn't seem to bother about the technical glitch. They just had an enjoyable time engaging in conversation with their peers. So, moral of the story, people forgive you. People excuse you for technological glitches. Let's go back to our slides. So that's the storytelling. And I'll come back to the 5 rules which some Harvard business professors had written. This was the first thing. Start with a story. Gain people's attention. And after that, now I want to dive into the first set of learning principles, which is adult learning. Although we keep calling it pedagogies, which is actually childhood learning, andragogy is the correct term for adult learning, doesn't matter. Adults are independent, self-directed, have accumulated experience, interested in problem solving, value learning that's necessary for real life, and have internal motivation. And all of you on this presentation today, you don't have to be here, but you are. You're all engaged in virtual teaching and learning. Therefore, it's relevant. So what we're going to do now is the next thing. Let's do some polls first.
It looks like numbers are coming in. We've got about half of participants having voted. Anyone else want to go ahead and pop your vote in for what is your professional background? It looks like most people have voted. I'm going to go ahead and end that polling and share the results with everybody. You should be able to see them now. All right, it looks like about 35% are physicians, followed by some nurses. We've got a good number of people, about 40%, who are teachers of undergraduate, graduate, or postgraduate trainees. We've got a couple of people like me, our educational specialists here, about a quarter of us. And I'd say the rest would be in administration, in advanced practice, pharmacy, or other.
Okay, so we can do the next poll.
We're going to go ahead and launch this poll. How comfortable are you in engaging your audience during virtual teaching sessions? It looks like votes are coming in. Great. We've got most people having voted. I'm going to share those results. It looks like 18 of us, 72%, are somewhat comfortable with engaging our audiences. About 20% are very comfortable, and a few of our participants are not comfortable, Shiva.
Thank you. And the next one?
Sure. What is the reason for your participation in this session? And people can select more than one option for this one. Votes are flying in. It looks like a lot of people are interested in learning more about the topic. I know I was. Looks like nearly everyone has voted. Almost everyone wants to learn more about the topic. A good number of people want to enhance their professional well-being or discuss key challenges in interactive virtual teaching and presentations. Network, about 25% of us want to network and enhance our professional well-being. Share experiences. So it looks like we definitely have a myriad of reasons for wanting to attend today.
So we started with the icebreaker. Now we've demonstrated the polling. And so thinking about polling, we can learn about our audience, who are the participants. We can learn about them professionally. We can learn about their goals. We can also do a very nice interactive tool for breaking the ice. And we can also do evaluations via polls. So there are many purposes to polls, but then it keeps people engaged. So the next thing we'll do is we are going to do breakout rooms. So pick a group reporter for each breakout room. Select one adult learning principle, which is on your handout. I've given 4. Just pick one and design one strategy to apply in your virtual teaching. And we'll have about 10 minutes for this, at which point we'll come back and the reporters from the group will report back.
So who was the reporter from Breakout Group 1?
Hi, this is Shelly. I was the reporter for our breakout room. And what we looked to focus on is they were kind enough to help me with establishing a safe learning environment for our learners. We talked about some of the easiest methodologies that we could utilize, introductions and icebreakers, and we felt that having the presenters share moments of vulnerability helped to enhance the relatability and approachability of that presenter or facilitator. We also considered questions that we could ask to engage them that were lighthearted, where kind of everybody would be able to participate. Questions, how was your week? What was the highlight of your week? Favorite food, vacation spot? One thing that's important to really establish that safe space, we felt, was establishing those ground rules. John used like the Vegas rules, what happens here stays here, and also putting things in a parking lot we discussed. So if things are kind of getting off topic or kind of trains off the rails, going ahead and having a speech for like, we'll put that in the parking lot and make sure we address it later, or we'll get back about that. If we have the opportunity to have outside conversations that would be appropriate to this learning environment, encouraging those persons to share it then. And to really have them feel safe, we want to make sure that our learners or participants feel heard and that they feel like what they're saying is relevant to either the content or the relationships that they've established. Offering praise and acknowledgement as well, that John was great to help make sure that we included, to help really solidify those behaviors and have them keep sharing. And use of questions to offer equal time to all participants, or possibly kind of engage them a little bit more. And giving some warm-up time, so maybe kind of some intro about, hey, we're going to be talking about this, so that way the learners can kind of prepare themselves for those moments. Overall, it was a great discussion, I think, with our group, and I was really happy to share our ideas.
Thank you, Shelley.
Who's the reporter of group number 2?
It was me. So we decided to take on engaging your learners in their needs assessment. And so we felt that, what Shubha had done was really define the who and the what of the conversation. So who's here and what do they want to hear? And so we thought that doing the chat or the poll, some kind of icebreaker, is actually really good. We actually did have a discussion about some third-party softwares you can use, like Poll Everywhere, Kahoot, which I've been told is something that Christina really likes, and something called Nearpod that I actually haven't heard of, that I think Caitlin or Rebecca, somebody brought it up. But she said it's somewhere between, it's somewhat gamey, but it also has some polls. And then we basically also talked about some challenges that happen when you try to engage the learners in their own needs assessment. Some of them were that they may mention things that you weren't prepared to talk about. And so we talked about flexibility of your presentation. Some examples were not putting a lot of words on your slides so that you can be very flexible with what you say. And it's not committed completely and set in stone in the presentation itself. So that gives you some flexibility. And also to talk about some of the anonymity and how anonymity actually enhances people's willingness to talk. So go back to a little bit of that safe space. So Poll Everywhere and some of the other software allow you to be anonymous at first and really kind of engage in the discussion as you get more comfortable.
Thanks, Eric.
Shubha, are you ready for group number 3?
Certainly am.
Shall I go for the group? We didn't actually nominate a group reporter, so we failed on that front. But to summarise the discussions that we had, we also chose creating a safe space within the online environment. And again, we touched upon the importance of introductions. So it was suggested having an initial introduction slide displaying who was present on screen, but also using the chat function. So if the group was larger, participants could post in the chat who they were and where they were from, in order that the introductions didn't take up too much of the session. The other thing that we said with the online environment was the ability to record sessions. However, that can sometimes then create problems or anxieties amongst participants as to the reason why it's being recorded. So again, just making it very clear as part of the ground rules why any recordings are being made, who it will be shared with, etc., just to create comfort amongst all the participants. I don't know whether any of my group members want to add anything to what we said. Cheers, thank you.
I thought that was some really great tips there. Breakout group number 4, who was the reporter for that group?
So we picked the most difficult topic, I think, and most challenging, which we found out, and it was topic number 4, how to do the evaluation of how to use or involve learners in self-evaluation. And we kind of were thinking that online learning brings a lot of challenges, and one of them is the evaluation, and also that to checking on your student, it's much harder than in a face-to-face phase. So we thought how to do it the best, and we thought maybe using the online breakout rooms and using the peer assessment where you have still combination of the online and one-to-one or one to a few in the group will be a good possibility. So we were thinking about the breakout rooms and about using video or recording. So we thought about situations to teach the communication skills, for example, delivering a bad news, and doing the videos either before or during the session, and then doing something like online mini CX, having a checklist where the group will assess how they did on communication skills and delivering the bad news, for example. So that was one of the ideas, and also using the similar functions of online systems like Kahoot or Poll Everywhere, or to evaluate what they learn for the knowledge may be interesting too. But we more were thinking that the students who are doing the clinical learning will need more of the support. So we were more leaning towards the evaluation of learning of communication skills and virtual patients and virtual OSCEs, which would be a part of self-evaluation in the breakout rooms.
Thank you.
And breakout room number 5?
So I'll be reporting for group 5. We also chose creating a safe learning space for the students, and the speakers in group 1 and 3 touched on a lot of the points that we discussed. We talked about being clear and clarifying the objectives of the session, attending to logistics, when it's going to start, when it's going to end, what's going to happen in between, what do you need to do if you need to step out for a bit, making everything clear, establishing roles, and confidentiality. If any polling would be gathered, it would be de-identified and only kept with the presenter. We also talked about icebreakers. We talked about conveying a value to students' perspective and what they bring to this session, and respect for their perspective. We also talked about encouraging using the chat function. Some students would feel a bit shy in front of the camera speaking for the first time. So just making it clear that you are welcome to use the chat function if you don't want to speak up, and having an assistant or a moderator to keep an eye on the chat function to make sure everyone is heard and every question is addressed is also a good idea. We also talked about the great opportunity in break rooms to talk with few people and how that can create a safe learning environment, and to make them aware that we're going to be using breakout rooms, just like we did. We learned about this today. Thank you.
With that, I'm just going to do very quickly back to 2 things. Remember, so far, what have we done? We've done the adult learning, and we've done the breakout group discussion, which focused on adult learning principles and how we're going to apply it to virtual learning. But I just want to throw out one other aspect. So we are all having fun because we are learning in a social setting. I wanted to jump to the social context of learning, which was first emphasized by Albert Bandura, psychologist. And I took a quote from him, which is not necessarily about social learning theory, but it resonated with me. That learning would be exceedingly laborious, not to mention hazardous, if people had to rely solely on the effects of their own actions to inform them what to do. So this tells us why social learning is important. Then Lev Vygotsky was a Russian psychologist who actually he expanded, when there was the behavioralist tradition of teaching and learning, like stimulus, reward, punishment. That's the behaviorist tradition. But he went one step further and he said, there is only so much people can learn, and this applied to childhood learning. Only so much people can learn, even if they exert their maximum. And but there is a level or the zone of proximal development. We reach that only by learning from each other, from others, and the environment. That's called zone of proximal development. And we refer to it quite a bit as scaffolding. So you learn, and then the environment teaches you, and you build on it. And for many people, there is a zone that is out of reach, except perhaps that geniuses like Bill Gates, Albert Einstein, but so be it. But this is again the importance of social learning. And finally, a community of practice. I wanted to introduce to people this concept. So we came together today as a group. We are fellow educators, so we have a common interest. We have a common goal. We want to improve our virtual learning, and we are sharing our experiences. But if we were more sustained, let's say we communicated with each other, met regularly, then we become a community. We're not yet a community, but we can become a community. But I did want to hit these three spots: common interest, common goal, and sharing experiences. So the last exercise, what we're going to do is we're going to think about this learning from each other. Okay, and we're going to work together on a whiteboard. So what I'd like people to do is all of us can write down one strategy that can maximize social learning principles. Social learning principles in virtual teaching. All right. So I think everybody should be able to access the whiteboard. Let's try it. We can do lots of things and have fun, but if it's a serious topic, we can actually reflect and then save the discussion. So I'm going to stop sharing the whiteboard, and then we go back to just the end. So we did this. So we've used polls, we've used chats, we've used breakout groups, we've used icebreakers. And so I want to conclude with 5 rules, which came out of the Harvard Business School, a business review. And of course, that diagram is a hot tip, by the way. So the first rule is a 60-second rule. So within 60 seconds, we have to tell a story, share something, do an icebreaker, stir up a debate. That's the 60-second rule in the first 60 seconds. A responsibility rule, the second is, so if you go to a movie, you're not going there to participate. You're going there as an observer. That's the worst thing that can happen in a virtual learning environment. So if we do things like exercises, breakout groups, then everyone's given a task. It's very hard to be an observer in smaller groups. So there is a responsibility. There is a shared responsibility. So make sure that your participants are not observers the whole time. I actually wanted to read one thing. So in a virtual classroom, you ask all these questions, and somebody says, and you ask a question, and you're particularly asking of one person and waiting for a reaction, and you get, I'm not sure I followed you. That could mean that I was shampooing my cat, and I didn't realize I'll be called upon. It's a nice humorous anecdote to think about, but it may be real. So anyway, nowhere to hide. So if you again give exercises, active exercises, questions people have to work to do, then they can't hide. And the smaller the groups, you cannot hide, because then, remember at the start I said, in the small groups, please go ahead and turn on your video. So even if you don't feel like turning on the video in a larger group, breakout rooms, small groups, harder to hide. And then the next rule, MVP rule, it is not most valuable player. Okay, it is minimum viable PowerPoint, meaning what is the minimum you think is essential on your PowerPoint? Use that. So I started working on these slides a couple of weeks ago, and since then, all I've been doing is deleting slides, and I brought it down to the minimum possible. Use what is essential, but engage in conversation. And then the last rule is a 5-minute rule, which is every 5 minutes, design an interaction, change the stimulus. Because apparently didactic presentations in the virtual world, after 10 minutes, the attention drops. In the real world, in the live world, 20 minutes. So in the virtual world, 10 minutes. So make sure that some exercises or combination of exercises is being given every 5 minutes. Thank you all for participating in this presentation. And Eric has raised his hand. Yes, Eric.
Thank you, Shuba. I just wanted to thank you and thank everyone for joining. And I wanted to offer just 2 reflections on my having gone through it. And one reflection, as we've all, I think, made a real jump to more virtual learning just in the last 3 months out of necessity, I've come to realize there's a real value in kind of learning one platform that seems to be your platform that you're gaining comfort with or using, and to kind of learn it well. And I would think both the teacher and the learner to learn it well, because it doesn't take too many of the features to really make it interactive, but you really do know how to need to use those features. And my second thought kind of follows that. I thought I would just share it, which it's certainly made me reflect that the importance of really planning your teaching is just so critical. And we say it all the time, but I think so many people try and jump from what you would do in a live environment and just replicate it virtually, and it just doesn't work that way. And so the time spent in really planning, as you did here and kind of showed us, it just speaks very loudly to me. So thank you, Shuba.